The alien species had always prided themselves on their mastery of the universe. They saw themselves as caretakers, reshaping planets, guiding civilizations, and, when necessary, erasing entire worlds that they deemed too chaotic. Earth was one such planet. To them, humanity was a reckless, violent species teetering on the brink of self-destruction. The decision to freeze Earth wasn't taken lightly. It was a calculated move to cleanse the planet, a reset meant to offer a new beginning, but not for humans. As the great ships of their fleet hovered above the pale blue dot, they watched as Earth transformed beneath their advanced technology. The freezing process was swift, seamless even. The ice spread across continents in a matter of years, encasing entire cities, engulfing forests, and locking the oceans in place. Everything went still, as it should. Earth was put into a stasis that would last for millennia, ensuring any remnants of humanity would vanish, and when the time was right, they could thaw it out and begin anew. But now, after centuries of silence, they were returning. It was time to see what had become of the frozen wasteland. There was no sense of urgency. They expected to find a barren, desolate world, perhaps the skeletal remains of the creatures that once walked its surface, but nothing more. Their mission now was to melt the ice, revive the atmosphere, and decide what sort of life form would best thrive in this renewed environment. They had done this many times before on other planets, after all. As their massive ships approached Earth's orbit, they began to deploy the necessary technology to initiate the thawing process. Giant beams of energy fired down from the skies, striking the glaciers, causing them to crack and splinter. Slowly, the ice began to retreat, revealing what had been hidden for thousands of years. At first, the readings were typical: frozen landscapes, ice-covered cities, a world that had been paused in its tracks. Nothing unusual. Then, the anomalies began. The first sign was a faint energy signature, something the aliens hadn't expected. It wasn't solar, not in this ice-bound wasteland. It took them by surprise, and they recalibrated their sensors to confirm the reading. It wasn't a mistake. There was power coming from beneath the ice, deep underground. And it wasn't natural. The aliens exchanged signals, confused but intrigued. A closer inspection was warranted. Probes were sent to investigate, digging deep into the ice, drilling into what had once been the surface of Earth. What they found left them speechless. Far beneath the ice, humanity had not only survived, it had thrived. Underground cities, powered by geothermal energy, lit up their monitors. Complex networks of tunnels stretched for miles, providing warmth, sustenance, and life to millions of humans who had adapted to this frozen world. This was not what the aliens had anticipated. Their calculations had been flawless. Earth was supposed to be inhospitable, barren, a blank slate. Instead, humanity had defied the odds. The aliens began to scan the underground structures more closely. What they saw didn't just baffle them, it unsettled them. These weren't primitive shelters hastily built by survivors scraping by. These were fully functioning, advanced civilizations. Their technology was unfamiliar to the aliens, not in its capability but in its creativity. The humans had developed methods to harness energy from the Earth's core, had created agricultural systems that could grow crops in total darkness, and had even found ways to communicate across their vast underground cities using a network the aliens couldn't decipher immediately. As the alien commanders studied the data, a sense of disbelief washed over them. This species had been left to die, frozen and forgotten. Yet here they were, not just surviving but evolving in ways the aliens hadn't predicted. They had underestimated the very thing they had sought to erase: the human will to adapt. The decision to freeze Earth had been logical, clinical. The humans were destructive, constantly at war with themselves, damaging their planet beyond repair. The aliens had believed that without intervention, humanity would destroy itself within a few centuries anyway. Freezing the planet had seemed like the kindest option, a mercy, really. But now, they were confronted with a reality they couldn't explain. Humanity had overcome the Ice Age, had faced the impossible, and instead of collapsing, they had found a way to conquer the very environment meant to extinguish them. The alien leaders convened, discussing their next move. What were they to do now? They couldn't simply refreeze the planet. That would be too obvious a failure of their original plan, and besides, they had orders not to interfere too much once life showed potential. But the fact that humans had survived this long meant they weren't a simple species to manage. They posed a unique problem, one the aliens had not encountered before. Some among the leadership argued for immediate contact. It was possible that humanity, after all this time, would welcome the aliens as saviors, not realizing it was they who had caused the freeze in the first place. Perhaps a new relationship could be formed, one where the aliens could guide them toward a more peaceful, harmonious existence. After all, humans had clearly evolved past their old ways of constant conflict, or they wouldn't have survived this long underground. Others were not so sure. They warned that humans were unpredictable, resilient, and perhaps more dangerous than the aliens initially thought. It was one thing to survive a natural disaster, but another to adapt to an entirely new world. The technology humans had developed in isolation was unlike anything the aliens had seen before. If humanity had the capacity to thrive under such extreme conditions, what else might they be capable of if pushed further? The debate raged on within the Alien Council, but one thing was clear: humanity was no longer the insignificant species they once were. The plan to reset Earth had failed, and now the aliens had to decide how to proceed in the face of this unexpected development. They had thought they were the masters of this planet, the overseers of life and death. But humanity had defied them, and in doing so, had proven that they were far from fragile. And as the thaw continued, revealing more and more of Earth's surface, the aliens couldn't shake the feeling that they were no longer in control. When the ice first began to spread across the globe, panic set in quickly. No one could explain why the temperature was dropping so drastically, so fast. The sky had darkened, the winds had grown colder, and within a few months, glaciers were forming in places they had no business being. Governments tried to reassure their people that it was a natural cycle, just another extreme weather pattern, but the scientists knew better. This wasn't natural. It wasn't even close. The world was changing in a way no one had ever seen before, and humanity was not ready. The initial years were chaos. Crops failed, entire regions became uninhabitable, and the seas began to freeze. Resources dwindled, and wars broke out over what little remained. The governments of the world collapsed one by one as their ability to maintain order slipped away in the face of the overwhelming environmental shift. But while the surface crumbled, a few groups of scientists, engineers, and visionaries banded together, determined not to let humanity go out so easily. They retreated underground, beneath the ice where the Earth's core still radiated warmth. There they began to build. Massive subterranean cities, powered by geothermal energy, took shape in the darkest, deepest caverns. It was a race against time as the freezing conditions intensified above ground, but these early survivors were resourceful. They scavenged what they could from the remnants of their former world and repurposed it to create habitats that would sustain them in this new reality. At first, the underground cities were nothing more than desperate shelters. The focus was on survival, keeping warm, finding water, growing food. The most basic needs were the priority. But as the years passed, these cities became more than just places to survive. They became homes. And as humanity adapted to the new normal, they didn't just hunker down and wait for the ice to recede. They thrived. The humans learned to harness the energy from the Earth itself. Geothermal power was abundant, and they built massive reactors that drew heat from deep within the planet's core, providing not only electricity but also a way to maintain a steady, livable climate underground. They developed advanced agricultural systems, using hydroponics to grow crops in artificial environments that mimic sunlight and ideal growing conditions. What little genetic diversity they had left in their food sources was carefully maintained, ensuring that the plants and animals necessary for survival could continue to reproduce and feed the population. Water came from the ice above them. Massive systems of pipes and tunnels were built to melt the glaciers and bring water down into the cities, where it was purified and stored. There were some early casualties as they worked out how to balance the limited resources they had with the growing needs of the population, but over time, they learned to manage it with precision. As the underground cities became more sophisticated, so did the people living within them. Generations passed, and with each one, humanity adapted more to life beneath the surface. They developed new technology, refined their systems, and most importantly, preserved the knowledge of the world that had come before the ice. Education became a cornerstone of their society. The elders knew that in order to survive long-term, future generations had to understand what had happened and how to keep pushing forward. They taught their children about the world that was lost, about the old nations and civilizations, and about the potential for a future where humanity might one day return to the surface. Communication was crucial. Early on, they established a network of long-range, low-frequency transmitters that allowed the various underground cities to stay in contact with each other. Information flowed freely between the different groups, allowing them to share advancements in technology, food production, and medicine. While each city was mostly self-sufficient, they maintained a level of cooperation that ensured no one group would fall behind. This unity became their strength. The culture that emerged from these underground cities was one of resilience. There was no place for the divisions that had once defined humanity. Race, nationality, religion, these things had lost their meaning in the face of the overwhelming need to survive. They had all become one people, united by the singular goal of outlasting the ice. Over time, the stories of the old world became just that, stories. They remembered the wars, the politics, and the greed that had once consumed the surface, but these were seen as relics of a past they had no intention of repeating. For those who lived in the underground cities, the ice was not an enemy. It was a challenge to overcome, a harsh reality that demanded adaptation. They did not curse the frozen world above them, instead, they used it to their advantage. The ice provided resources, challenges to solve, and a reminder that their ancestors had fought against nature before. They had conquered deserts, scaled mountains, and sailed across oceans. The ice was just another obstacle. Humanity had learned how to thrive in this new world, but there was always an undercurrent of hope that one day they would return to the surface. It was in the stories they told their children, in the way they continued to study the frozen earth above them, and in the constant exploration of ways to reverse the ice's grip. They had adapted, yes, but they had not forgotten what it meant to live under the open sky. As the centuries passed, humans continued to evolve. Physically, they remained much the same, but mentally and emotionally, they had become something new. They were more cooperative, more focused on the long-term survival of their species than on individual desires. They valued knowledge, perseverance, and community above all else. Their underground cities reflected this, sprawling networks of tunnels and chambers, filled with light and life, a testament to the ingenuity and tenacity of their people. The idea of reclaiming the surface was not an idle dream. Even though the ice showed no signs of receding, they knew that one day, conditions might change. Whether it was through their own technological advancements, or by some external force, they would be ready. They monitored the surface continuously, studying the glaciers, measuring the climate, and preparing for the moment when they could return. In the deepest parts of their cities, plans were being made. Some believed that the ice age would last forever, but others were more optimistic. They saw the ice as temporary, a challenge to overcome, not a permanent state. They had built a world beneath the surface, but it was never meant to be a permanent home. The surface belonged to them, and they intended to take it back when the time came. Humanity, as it always had, was playing the long game. The alien probes descended through the thinning ice, their sleek forms gliding silently towards the surface. Each one equipped with sensors far beyond anything humanity could have imagined, they began their exploration, quietly observing, recording, and analyzing. What they found below was unlike anything in their previous encounters. As the probes transmitted data back to the alien ships, the scope of human survival became clearer. This wasn't just a collection of ragged survivors clinging to life. This was a fully functioning society, thriving beneath the frozen shell of Earth. It was unexpected and unsettling to the alien commanders. They had never seen a species overcome such conditions, let alone one that they had specifically engineered to fail. The first major shock came when they intercepted human communications. The signals were faint, buried deep within the planet's surface, but they carried a strange complexity. Unlike the languages the aliens had catalogued centuries ago, these communications were dense with layered meaning, codes, and cultural references that had evolved during the long isolation underground. It spoke of a society that had not just survived but had grown sophisticated in its seclusion. The probes continued to relay footage of underground cities. These weren't rudimentary shelters. They were highly advanced, sprawling networks of interconnected habitats, bustling with life and activity. The geothermal power grids stretched for miles, providing energy that lit up entire underground regions. From the advanced farming techniques to their sophisticated environmental controls, everything about these cities showed not just survival. The alien commanders, while observing all this, struggled to reconcile what they were seeing with their understanding of humanity. They had expected to find remnants of a once great species, broken and barely holding on after the extreme freeze. Instead, they found a civilization that had adapted and even improved in ways that defied their earlier assumptions. There was something unsettling about humanity's ability to thrive in such dire conditions, something that made the aliens question the limits of human resilience. As the aliens began to analyze the data from the probes, they became aware of something even more alarming. Humanity's technology was advancing at an unprecedented rate. The cities were powered by energy sources that the aliens had initially overlooked, and they quickly realized that humans had developed their own methods of harnessing geothermal and nuclear energy. Not only that, but their scientific progress had continued in isolation, with humans engineering solutions to problems the aliens had never anticipated. The aliens debated amongst themselves. Some wanted to reach out immediately, to communicate with this new form of humanity, and see if they could be reasoned with. Others were more cautious. They understood that humanity had changed in ways they hadn't accounted for. The humans had evolved, not just biologically, but intellectually, emotionally. Their technological development and ability to adapt to an uninhabitable world made them unpredictable. The question was no longer whether humanity had survived, but what kind of threat they now posed. There was an unspoken fear among the alien leaders. The human race they had once deemed inferior now represented something more dangerous, a species that could overcome the very environment meant to destroy it. What else might they be capable of? The more they studied the data, the clearer it became that humanity had transcended its former limitations. The underground cities were a testament to their ingenuity, but also to their refusal to be extinguished. One of the most unexpected discoveries was the human communication networks. Even from deep underground, they had managed to maintain links between their cities, sharing knowledge, strategies, and technological advancements. The aliens had never encountered a species capable of this level of coordination, while under such harsh conditions. It was as if the Ice Age had forced humanity into a crucible, and instead of breaking, they had emerged stronger, more unified. The alien commanders were torn between curiosity and caution. On the one hand, humanity had proven itself to be resilient and adaptive, qualities that could make them valuable allies or subjects of study. On the other hand, this same resilience could make them dangerous, especially if they perceived the aliens as a threat. It was unclear how much humanity knew about the origins of the Ice Age, but the possibility of them discovering the truth loomed large in the minds of the alien leaders. Still, some argued for direct contact. They believed humanity's advancements could be channeled, guided, perhaps even exploited. If humanity could be persuaded to see the aliens as saviors, perhaps they could be integrated into a broader galactic order. The idea of manipulating them through carefully crafted narratives appealed to the more ambitious among the alien ranks. After all, humans had no reason to suspect that the aliens were responsible for their near extinction. But others, more cautious, pointed out the unpredictable nature of human psychology. They had studied humanity's history of conflict, its capacity for rebellion and defiance, even when faced with overwhelming odds. What if humanity, after all it had endured, saw the aliens not as saviors but as oppressors? What if the humans, hardened by centuries of isolation, saw themselves as the rightful rulers of Earth and any interference as an attack? The aliens had underestimated humanity once before. The thought of making the same mistake again weighed heavily on the minds of the decision-makers. They could not afford to miscalculate, not when the stakes were so high. The possibility of humanity turning against them, of a war with a species that had already defied extinction, was a risk they were not willing to take lightly. As the discussions continued, the aliens prepared for a closer examination of the underground cities. The data collected so far was valuable, but it wasn't enough. They needed to understand the full extent of humanity's technological progress and, more importantly, their psychological state. Would they view the aliens as gods, saviors from the frozen world above? Or would they recognize them as the architects of their near annihilation? The decision was made to send down more sophisticated probes, capable of direct interaction with human technology and communication systems. These new probes would infiltrate the human networks, gathering information on their political structures, their levels of cooperation, and any signs of hostility. It was a delicate mission. If the humans detected the probes, it could trigger a reaction that the aliens were not yet prepared for. The alien commanders knew that the next steps would be critical. How they approached humanity from this point on would determine whether Earth became a potential ally, a subject, or a threat. The stakes were high, and for the first time in centuries, the aliens felt a sense of uncertainty. They had always believed themselves to be the superior species, the ones who controlled the fate of lesser civilizations. But now, in the face of humanity's unexpected survival and evolution, they weren't so sure. The probes continued their descent, silently cutting through the layers of ice and rock that separated the humans from the surface world. As the thawing process accelerated, the underground cities stirred with the awareness that the surface was becoming accessible again. For generations, humanity had adapted to life beneath the ice, but now, the question that lingered in every mind was whether they were ready to reclaim the surface. It was a delicate moment. The leadership had long prepared for this day, but no one could have anticipated the new variables introduced by the alien presence. The discovery of the alien probes had been a tipping point. Humanity had always speculated that there might be external forces at play in the events that led to the Ice Age, but now, those suspicions were confirmed. The probes were carefully analyzed, and although they revealed only fragments of information, it was clear that they originated from a highly advanced extraterrestrial species. This changed everything. The leadership convened, and debates erupted about the appropriate course of action. Some believed that diplomacy was the best approach. If these aliens were the ones responsible for the Ice Age, perhaps they could be reasoned with, or at the very least, persuaded to leave humanity in peace. The idea was to negotiate from a position of strength. Humanity had survived the catastrophe meant to erase them, after all. They were not weak or desperate, they had thrived against unimaginable odds. Others argued that trust was out of the question. These aliens had initiated the Ice Age, had nearly wiped humanity off the map, and now they were observing them from a distance. No matter their motives, they could not be trusted. The more cautious voices insisted that humanity should proceed with full preparedness for conflict. They had advanced significantly during their time underground, and while they knew they might be outmatched technologically, they had something the aliens didn't: an intimate understanding of their planet and the hard-earned lessons of survival under extreme conditions. Ultimately, a hybrid strategy was adopted. They would prepare for the possibility of war but remain open to the idea of dialogue, if only to buy time. The leadership mobilized, and their focus shifted to fortifying their cities and bolstering defenses while quietly monitoring the aliens' activity. Plans were set into motion to begin resurfacing. Small teams would be sent up first to test the environmental conditions and reclaim vital ground on the surface, with the intention of establishing permanent outposts. The thaw revealed much more than just ice. Old remnants of human civilization were uncovered, cities frozen in time, the remnants of a world that had been left behind. These ruins served as a stark reminder of what had been lost and of what humanity needed to protect. Teams were dispatched to gather resources and technology from these frozen relics, but there was also a sense of mourning that swept through the underground population. For many, the surface was a symbol of hope, but it also carried the weight of history. As more teams ventured to the surface, they began to notice signs that the aliens were watching them more closely. The presence of the probes was undeniable, but there were no direct confrontations. It seemed as though the aliens were content to observe, perhaps gauging humanity's readiness to interact. Still, the tension was palpable. Humanity's leadership knew they were being tested, though they couldn't yet discern the true intentions of their visitors. Meanwhile, the resettlement of the surface continued. The first outposts were established in the areas where the Thaw had created pockets of habitable land. These initial settlements were small, fortified, and designed to expand gradually. The idea was to create a foothold, to test the limits of their newfound freedom while maintaining the security of the underground cities. The humans were cautious, aware that the aliens could intervene at any moment. For the first time in centuries, the sky was visible to human eyes. The cold, clear air felt alien to those who had known only the artificial warmth of the underground. It was both exhilarating and unsettling. The surface world had once belonged to them, but now it felt foreign. Yet, there was a deep resolve among those who ventured above. This was their world to reclaim, and no alien species, no matter how advanced, would take that from them. Back in the underground cities, scientists and engineers continued their work, not just on fortifying defenses but on understanding the alien technology they had encountered. They reverse-engineered parts of the probes they had captured, attempting to uncover weaknesses. It became clear that while the aliens were technologically superior in many ways, their understanding of Earth's unique conditions was limited. Humanity had developed innovations out of necessity, pushing the boundaries of their resourcefulness, and this gave them an unexpected advantage. The leadership knew that any confrontation with the aliens would have to be strategic. Direct conflict would likely end in disaster, but there were other ways to resist. Humanity had always been adept at using its environment to its advantage. If the aliens didn't understand the intricacies of Earth's unique atmosphere, its geothermal properties, and its resources, then humanity could exploit that. Plans were drawn up for potential sabotage of alien operations, should it come to that, using the very planet itself as a weapon. Despite the looming threat, life on the surface slowly began to take root. The outposts expanded, and soon, small colonies were established in areas where the Thaw had created livable conditions. It wasn't much, but it was a start. Every step toward rebuilding was a statement. Humanity wasn't going anywhere. They had survived what was meant to destroy them, and now, they would reclaim what was theirs. The aliens, for their part, remained silent. There were no overt acts of aggression, but their presence was always felt. The ships still hovered above, and the probes continued their observations, but the leadership understood that this quiet period would not last forever. Eventually, the aliens would make their move, whether it was to negotiate, manipulate, or destroy. As preparations continued, a sense of unity grew among the human population. The trials they had faced in the frozen world had already bound them together, but now, the prospect of reclaiming the surface gave them a renewed sense of purpose. They had not come this far to be defeated now. They would meet the aliens on their own terms, not as supplicants, but as equals, hardened by survival and fortified by their collective strength. The leadership remained vigilant. They knew the time for confrontation, in whatever form it might take, was approaching. But they also knew that humanity was ready. The aliens had underestimated them once before. They had seen only a fragile species, incapable of surviving the trials they imposed. But the truth was far more complex. The aliens had created the Ice Age, but in doing so, they had forged something stronger than they could have imagined. The humans who now stood on the thawed ground of Earth were not the same as those the aliens had sought to erase. They were a new force, one that had adapted, evolved, and risen from the ashes of their old world. And as they looked to the sky, they knew they were not alone, but they were ready for whatever came next.